Hello Guy, welcome the series novel of Jumana episode 4. The well was not far from the village. Perhaps that is why Father Maytham began to worry about his daughter's delay all that time. While he was in the market, he kept glancing toward the entrance, hoping to catch sight of her return at any moment. During one of the times he looked toward the entrance, he saw something that filled him with dread. His donkey entered the market alone, agitated and distressed. Realizing that something terrible had happened, he dropped everything he was holding, leaned on his wooden crutch, and limped as fast as his one leg could carry him to intercept the donkey. He shouted, "Where's Rehana? For the love of God, why didn't she return with you, Samari?" The donkey brayed several times, as if trying to explain to him and to the gathered villagers what had happened, but no one understood except his wife, Kamaria, who began braying with him. Maytham shouted at the donkey, "Take us to where you were with her last." Even though the villagers despised Maytham because he was a thief, they set aside their feelings during this crisis and followed him, offering help and support. Samari led them to the site, but all they found there was an overturned shoe. Maytham whispered as he clutched the shoe to his heart, "It's her shoe." Everyone understood, based on similar past events, who had taken Rehana and realized that she was gone and would never return. Maytham knew this grim reality too, but he also knew of a possible way to save his daughter. Mounting his donkey, he spoke with tear-filled eyes. "I know you understand human speech," as Rehana used to say. "Samari, listen carefully." His voice trembled with fear and desperation. "If you want your friend to come back, run in that direction with all the speed God has given you." Samari ran eastward toward the dark forest, fast as a winged horse, swift as if carried by the winds of God. After a short while, when Maytham reached the edge of the dark forest, a chill ran through him. It wasn't the imposing sight of the forest that caused it, but rather the feeling that a terrifying creature was watching him from within. As he dismounted, he said to the donkey, "Stay here." Using his wooden crutch, he walked toward the entrance, unaware that he was walking toward his fate. The moment his feet touched the forest floor, the guardian cobra, the Jinn serpent Terra, attacked him from between the trees. But before her deadly strike landed, someone called out, "Terra, no, please, he's my friend." Terra stopped her attack out of respect for the voice, but she remained determined to fulfill her duty. "He entered the forest. He must be killed. It's the law of the family." Jumana appeared suddenly, standing between Terra and Maytham. Her hair and eyes turned a fierce red as she prepared to fight, saying, "Anyone who tries to harm my friend is my enemy. That is the law of friendship." Despite Jumana's strength, Terra could have easily overpowered her, reached the human, and killed him. Instead, she closed her eyes and motioned with her massive head toward the edge of the forest, saying, "Take him out of here quickly." "Thank you, Terra. I will never forget this favor." Jumana led him out of the forest and reproached him. "Didn't I warn you against coming here? What happened to your mind? Please, Jumana, save her. The Saali have kidnapped Rehana." "Where did this happen and when?" "Just now, on the path leading to the well," he added pleadingly. "She is the only reason I live. For the sake of our friendship, save her." Jumana was aware of her strength. She was the daughter of the mighty emperor and inherited much of his power, but she was untrained in combat and knew she could not sneak into the Saali mountains alone. Considered asking for her family's help but quickly dismissed the idea, remembering they knew nothing about her connection with Maytham, which could land her in even greater trouble if they found out. She cared deeply for Maytham, loved him as a friend and found refuge in their bond. She would do anything for that friendship. "Go home. I will bring her back to you." No sooner had Maytham blinked than Jumana disappeared before him, shifting to another place, deep in the dark forest. Cobra, the serpent guardian of the forest, watched as Maytham left. While doing so, she sensed eyes watching her from behind. She quickly turned around but saw no one. Despite this, as a guardian of the Emperor's forest, she had learned to trust her instincts. She slithered backward a few meters, probing the area with her black tongue, until she abruptly stopped and retracted it, her eyes widening with the realization that a great catastrophe was looming. In a filthy cave atop a towering mountain, an old man named Hajjaj sat alone on a stone seat, sharpening his long fangs with an iron file while singing, "My daughter, my belly, craves human flesh. If you return without my meal, I'll pierce you with my fawn." Soon after, his daughter Galila returned, holding a small dark-skinned girl intended as his meal. The moment he saw her, Hajjaj dropped the iron file and lunged to devour her. But before his fangs reached her neck, Galila warned him, "It will happen again like last time." The old man paused, recalling how, in a previous attempt to eat alive prey, some of his teeth broke due to the toughness of the flesh and bones. He protested, "But I love raw meat." Galila, with the care of a daughter concerned for her elderly father's well-being, replied, "But it has become harsh on you and hurts your stomach." Then added as a suggestion, "Let me cook it for you. It will be easier to chew and digest." Reluctantly, he released the girl, grumbling, "Hurry, hunger gnaws at me." Right away, father. Outside, Galila filled a cooking pot with water and lit a gentle fire beneath it. As she waited for the water to boil, she noticed the strange calm and composure of the small dark-skinned girl. In the past, all her captives, men, women, and children alike, had either fought back, screamed, or begged for their lives. But this girl was unlike any prey she had ever captured. Why are you so calm? Aren't you afraid? With unshakable confidence, Rihanna replied, You are the one who should be afraid, not me. For a moment, the Saali felt a chill of fear at that response, and she cautiously asked, And why should I be afraid? Because you let my friend go. The fear faded, replaced by a mocking smile. Don't tell me you think that donkey of yours is coming to save you. I don't think so. I believe it. Galila dismissed her words as the wild imaginings of a desperate girl. She pulled a small vial from her robe containing a clear liquid, held it to Rihanna's mouth, and ordered her, Drink it. Rihanna knew nothing of the liquid, but the Saali forced her to swallow it. Once it settled in her stomach, she asked, What is it? Galila tossed the vial aside and answered, A potion that will make you lose consciousness, so you won't feel the pain of death. Do you have more of it? Mockingly, she replied, Did you like its taste, dear? As she began to lose consciousness, Rihanna murmured, No, but you and your father will need it soon. In truth, the Saali was impressed by her, and for the first time, she felt pity for a prey she had captured. Had her father Hajjaj been any less hungry that day, she might have untied her and returned her safely to the village. Shortly after, the water began to boil. It was time to butcher the prey and place her meat in the pot, leaving it to cook until tender and easier to chew and digest. Galila did not need a knife to sever the girl's neck. Her long nails sufficed and more. She drew her nails close to Rihanna's neck, but before she could separate it from its place, she heard a sound, reminiscent of stones scraping against each other. Intrigued, she cautiously went to investigate but found nothing and assumed it was just the wind. She decided to return and continue cooking. Finally, when she was done, Galila returned to the cave holding a plate heaped with hot meat cut into small pieces. She set it down and moved it closer to him, saying, Here is your food. Hajjaj lunged at the meat and began eating voraciously. While chewing, he noticed his daughter was not eating and asked, Aren't you hungry? I don't feel like eating. Don't tell me you pitied her. No, I did not pity her. I enjoyed killing her. Then what's wrong? Nothing. Enjoy your meal. As soon as Hajjaj finished eating, he left the cave to move his body a bit to aid digestion. However, outside the cave, he saw something that puzzled and shocked him. He saw Rihanna, the young black girl, sleeping. He called to his daughter, If the girl is still alive, then whose meat did you cook for me? Galila emerged from the cave and approached him, her features changing and shifting with every step until she transformed into a girl he had never seen before, a girl with hazel eyes, freckles scattered across her face, and a jasmine scent emanating from her. The meat I cooked for you is that of your daughter, Galila. She said this and, before giving him a chance to comprehend the trick, thrust her hand into his chest, piercing through his body. He should have died instantly, as his heart was now in her grasp. However, the old ghoul managed to muster his remaining strength and cry out for help from his tribe before Jumana silenced him forever by driving her other hand into his body. His cry was not loud enough, but as a precaution, Jumana picked up Rihanna in her arms and prepared to flee. Yet, she could not escape, as if something had disrupted the power of fire within her. She tried again and again but failed. When she turned around, she realized the cause. A ghoul woman was staring at her. Jumana had always ignored her father's advice to undergo training, relying solely on her innate power. This was precisely why she could not disappear now, for jinn lose their ability to vanish when someone stares at them without blinking. It seemed the ghoul woman knew this fact and kept her eyes wide open. Sensing danger, Jumana prepared to attack, but just as she took her first step, she halted, not because she had a new idea or found a solution, but because an army of ghouls suddenly appeared, surrounding her from all directions. The tribe members screamed and jeered at her like a horde of angry monkeys, and she realized that nothing would satisfy them but her death. Determined not to give in without a fight, she prepared for battle. Suddenly, an eerie silence enveloped the place. Breaking the silence, an old ghoul named Algisa emerged from among the crowd. She had a hunched back and a limping gait due to mismatched leg lengths, one human leg, the other belonging to a donkey. Algisa approached and stood before her, asking, "Which jinn family are you from, you wretch?" She screamed, "Speak, damn you! Why do you care? My family has nothing to do with this matter." The old ghoul woman smiled, revealing her yellow, jagged teeth, as realization dawned. "You must be from the emperors, or else you wouldn't hide their name from me." Jumana's silence was enough of an answer. "Which of the mighty ones is your father?" "Jabbar." Upon hearing that name, fear crossed Algisa's face. She knew the wrath Jabbar would unleash upon her tribe if anything happened to his daughter. "Leave this place and never return," she said. But just as she spoke, the tribe erupted in anger again. Understanding their demands, Algisa said, "But the black girl must stay here." In a protective reflex, Jumana pulled Rihanna close and protested. "Why must she stay? Her blood will pay for the blood you spilled. And if I refuse?" "I wasn't asking for your opinion." Suddenly, 3 mighty ogres bound Jumana's hands, preventing her from moving. Algisa seized Rihanna, lifted her high, and proclaimed to her tribe, "The blood of this black girl in exchange for the blood of Galila and Hajjaj." She repeated louder, "The blood of this black girl in exchange for the blood of Galila and Hajjaj." And again, even louder, "The blood of this black girl in exchange for the blood of Galila and Hajjaj." The tribe members cheered in support of their leader's decision. Jumana struggled with all her strength to break free and save Rihanna, but the 3 strong ogres kept her tightly bound, leaving her helpless to do anything but watch the execution unfold. Algisa raised her filthy, long-nailed hand and prepared to strike Rihanna's neck. Jumana could not bear the horror of the scene. She closed her eyes tightly and screamed. She screamed with all her might. When she opened her eyes moments later, she saw a head rolling at her feet. But it was not Rihanna's head. It was Algisa's head. For a moment, Jumana thought she was hallucinating, but when she looked around, she saw the heads of all the ogres had fallen from their bodies and lay scattered on the ground. The scene was terrifying, as if the sky had rained severed heads. Jumana had not known until that moment that she possessed such immense power. With a single scream, she had obliterated an entire tribe of ogres. She picked up Rihanna and left that place. She couldn't use her power of teleportation. She had expended much of her energy and needed to walk the distance to Al-Jasasa village on foot. Despite the exhaustion and fatigue, she was happy because she had saved Rihanna and fulfilled the trust placed in her by her friend. As she walked back, she longed to see the gentle dimple that would appear on his left cheek when he saw her return with his daughter. She knew he would later ask why she risked her life, and she had already prepared her answer. Friendship is something worth risking one's life for. When she reached Maytham's house, she knocked on the door. She waited a moment, but he did not answer. At first, this worried her. She had expected him to be anxiously waiting and to rush to the door as soon as she knocked to make sure his daughter was safe. She knocked again, this time harder. When there was still no answer, she broke down the door and entered. But before she could take a single step into the courtyard, she froze, as if her limbs had been paralyzed. She saw what filled her heart with terror. Blood. A lot of blood seeping from under one of the room doors. She laid Rihanna down gently and went to investigate. When she opened the door, she saw something she wished she had died before witnessing. Maytham was lying on the ground, soaked in a pool of blood. Blood was gushing from his body, and the shadow of death loomed around him. He felt intense thirst and crushing pain pressing on his heart, but when he opened his mouth, he did not ask for water or medicine. Instead, he asked, "How is my daughter?" Fear silenced her, rendering her unable to speak. "Did you save her, Jumana? Is she safe?" "Yes, she is safe." Upon hearing this, he smiled, a gentle dimple forming on his left cheek, and said, "I knew you would not let me down." She stepped closer, her bare feet crossing the pool of blood, knelt down, and said, "Let me see your wound." "Maybe," he interrupted, "there's no need. It's fatal and beyond healing." She supported his head in her hands and, with fury burning in her eyes, demanded, "Who did this to you?" "I don't know." She studied his eyes and said, "The wound is in your chest. That means you saw who did it. I will tell you, but only if you promise not to harm him. Believe me, I will stop at nothing to avenge whoever did this. It's my last wish." He added, "Promise me you won't hurt him." "Agreed." "Agreed? What do you mean, Jumana? Will you not fulfill your friend's last wish?" "Agreed." He revealed the identity of his attacker. It was your mother. At that moment, Jumana was overwhelmed by a mix of conflicting emotions. Shame, because her mother was the cause. Deep regret, because she should have ended their relationship sooner but had become too attached, bringing him to this fate. Maytham, with his large black hand, reached for her delicate white face and said, as if reading her thoughts, "Do not feel regret. Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me in many years. Will we not be friends after today?" "We will, but we will never see each other again." He left her with one final wish, "Remember me always." Forgetting is painful for the dead in their graves. At that moment, Jumana felt a mix of conflicting emotions. Shame because her mother was the cause, and deep regret so intense because she should have ended her relationship with him, but instead she grew more attached, which led him to. Maytham stretched out his large, dark hand toward her delicate, pale face and, as if reading her mind, said, I don't want you to regret. Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me in many years. Won't we be friends after today? She asked. We will, but we will never see each other again, he replied, adding, always remember me. Forgetting hurts the dead in their graves. She said, I will take care of Rehana in your absence. No, your mother will not leave her alone, he responded. And leave her without care? A thief expects death at any moment. I have already told her what to do if harm befalls me, so do not worry about her. She will know how to handle it. He then crawled with difficulty to the wall behind him, leaned against it, and said, I've lost a lot of blood. I want to die to find peace, but something weighs heavily on my soul and keeps it from leaving. What is it? She asked. It is a secret, an old secret I have kept to myself. Now, I want to let it go so that my soul may become light enough to sail to the heavens. Jumana listened with all her being, while tears welled up in his eyes as he prepared to share his final secret. He said, I grew up in this life as a slave to a wealthy family in the kingdoms of the dragon. Among the women of that family, there was a girl named Rehana. His eyes sparkled with deep longing as he uttered her name, and a smile played on his lips at the memory. He continued, we shared a long story together, though I don't have enough time to tell you all of it. But in that story, we fell in love with each other and decided to flee and marry. And that's what we did. They fled to the kingdom of Ababil and settled in the village of Jasasa, where they had their first child, a son. 7 years later, one day while his wife was pregnant with their second child, she fell gravely ill. He carried her to the healer, who told him, her condition is very serious. She needs medicine, or she and the unborn child will die. The medicine was available but very expensive, beyond Maytham's means. He couldn't stand by and watch his wife die without doing something. She was my wife, Jumana, the woman who gave up wealth, status, family, and everything for me. And what did you do? She asked. In a sorrowful, cryptic tone, he replied, I got her the medicine. How did you afford it? She asked again. Maytham closed his eyes, trying to hold back tears that still spilled down his cheeks. He revealed the secret that had weighed on his soul. I sold my 7-year-old son, he asked in a fearful tone. To whom? To a merchant in the slave market. And what did your wife do when she learned the truth? She died of grief over it. He continued, I was going to follow her in death, but the wise man said he managed to save the fetus she was carrying, so I decided to continue living for my daughter, whom I later named Rehana, after her mother. And your son, Maytham, why didn't you try to get him back? I couldn't. The merchant said the boy now belonged to him and that if I wanted him, I had to buy him at the new price. He wanted twice the price I sold him for. I asked at least to be allowed to speak to him one last time, and he agreed. On that fateful day, Maytham entered the storeroom, the place where the merchant kept his goods. The boy was imprisoned in a cage, much like an animal, sitting sorrowfully in the corner like a defeated hedgehog. Maytham approached and called out to him, Ayub, but the boy didn't turn. Maytham initially thought his son didn't hear him, so he called again. Little pesky flea, it's me, your father. The boy replied without turning. I am a slave. A slave has no father or mother. What are you saying? Who told you such things? My boy. At that moment, the merchant's workers came and began loading goods for departure, including the cage containing the defeated hedgehog. Maytham tried to stop them, but the man in charge of guarding the convoy, a massive, imposing warrior, struck him hard on the head, rendering him unconscious. An hour later, Maytham awoke alone in an empty storeroom and ran as fast as he could to catch up with the merchant's convoy. He knew he couldn't rescue his son with so many guards around, but simply wanted to say one thing. Please forgive me, my son. Say that you forgive me. Ayub did not respond, so Maytham continued to chase the convoy, shouting, Please forgive me. Say you forgive me, until exhaustion overcame him, and he collapsed, watching the convoy disappear into the fog and vanish. When he finished revealing this secret, he felt his soul lighten, as if it might leave his body at any moment, so he asked Jumana to bring him paper. I want to leave a message for my daughter. She brought the paper, and he began writing, a letter where his finger was the pen, and his blood was the ink flowing from his body. When he was done, he handed the letter to her and asked her to give it to his daughter to read later. A heavy silence stretched between Jumana and Maytham. On one hand, Maytham felt relieved for unburdening himself of the secret. On the other, he regretted it, fearing Jumana would feel ashamed for befriending someone like him. His fear grew, knowing he had little time left to convince her of his remorse and make her understand the gravity of his unforgivable sin. While lost in his final thoughts, she spoke, sensing what he was feeling. There is the family you're born into and the family you choose for yourself when you grow up. She then asked, Have you ever heard of the Helana? He shook his head to indicate no. So she said, Helana means family. She explained that Helana is an ancient term known in past civilizations, meaning precisely, the family one chooses for themselves as an adult. She then shared one of the most important laws of the Helana. In that family, It does not matter if the members share the same gender, color, or race. In that family, it is not important if the individuals are blood relatives. What matters is that they are willing to sacrifice their blood for one another in times of need. Then, just as he had reached out his hand at the start of the relationship, she now reached out her hand at the end and said, "You and I are one, Helena." He extended his hand and smiled. "You and I are one, Helena." Then his smile gradually disappeared and his hand fell to the ground. In the days to come, you will discover that one can bear all kinds of pain, except the pain of parting from loved ones, a separation with no hope of reunion. She closed his eyes with her hand and wished that the Lord would forgive him for his sin. Then she carried him to the cemetery of the village of Algesasa to bury him there. Of course, she did not forget to leave the letter he had written at his daughter's head so that she could read it when she awoke, a letter written in blood. 11. I went to your mother so that she wouldn't be alone there. When Jumana finished burying him, she turned to leave, but she stopped in her tracks, stunned by what she saw. Standing before her was the last person she expected to meet. You? That person was her mother, Taj, which surprised her as she had thought her mother would disappear for a long time after killing Maytham. Overwhelmed with fury, she rushed to take revenge on her, though not to kill her, just to vent her rage. Taj, however, avoided the attack, turned, and scolded her. I didn't know you were this despicable. The despicable one is the one who forgets their horrible deeds and blames others for their reactions. Ever since you met that human, Jumana, you've been recklessly putting yourself in danger without considering the consequences. I had to kill him to protect you from your own recklessness. How could you kill him when my father granted him protection? He entered the dark forest, and thus your father's protection was nullified, making his death permissible. Perhaps this quarrel slightly lessened her anger, though it did not eliminate it. It subsided just enough for her to remember Maytham's last wish, causing her to halt her attack. We should leave when a discussion becomes fruitless, was one of her life's principles. She was cunning enough to win the affection of others through kindness, so that when punishment became necessary, mere distance from her would be enough to destroy them. I no longer need you. At first, Taj didn't grasp the severe implications of this punishment, so Jumana clarified. My father allowed you entry to the castle as long as I needed you. Now, I no longer need you, which means the castle is off limits to you from this moment on. Taj's tone changed, as happens with an obstinate sinner who suddenly recognizes the severity of their punishment. She tried to plead for forgiveness through their bond of kinship. I'm your mother, but Jumana cut her off. From this moment on, you are not my mother, and I will never forgive you for this mistake. She said this, then disappeared. Taj felt a deep sadness after her daughter left and sat by Maytham's grave, speaking to him. I fulfilled my side of the agreement, and I will continue to honor it. After seeing Maytham step into the dark forest, she knew that Jabbar's protection over him had ceased, making him vulnerable to her vengeance. When Maytham returned home from the forest, he was confronted by a strange woman. Though advanced in years, she retained a striking beauty that hinted at how captivating she must have been in her youth. He sensed from her gaze and body language that she meant to harm him. He considered drawing the knife concealed beneath his clothes and attacking first, but she, as if cutting to the chase, said, "Keep your knife where it is. I cannot be killed that way." Who are you? I am Taj, and I believe my daughter has mentioned me to you before. What do you want? She said to him bluntly. I've come to kill you, and that is not up for debate. She added, as fear gripped him, and I will kill your daughter after you, unless what? He asked. Unless you ask Jumana not to seek revenge for you. Taj, of course, could kill him without leaving any trace leading back to her, but she knew that his daughter would inevitably uncover her involvement. No one else had as strong a motive to kill Maytham. He, knowing that death was inevitable, said, I will ask her not to seek revenge, but on one condition. You are not in a position to impose conditions, but speak your condition. She replied, Rihanna is alone in this world. Don't tell me you want me to take care of her. No, but I want you to take her to her mother's family in the kingdoms of the dragon. She fell silent, and her silence signified agreement. He said to her, follow me. I will give you something. He led her to his room. There, he pulled out a necklace bearing the seal of the family. He handed it to her and said, with this necklace, the family will recognize and care for her. She took the necklace from his hand, then asked him, something that had been weighing on her mind. I wonder why my daughter would sacrifice her life for you and your daughter. He answered with the same words Jumana had prepared to say to him, because friendship is something worth sacrificing one's life for. Typical human foolishness. She scoffed, then suddenly stabbed him in the stomach with her hand. As she left him bleeding, she said, if you uphold your side of the agreement, I will uphold mine. Jumana appeared in her room and began smashing things, a method she used to release her anger. She continued until nothing in her room was left intact. She lay down amid the debris, placing her hands behind her head as a makeshift pillow, and reflected on the situation. First, she had grown attached to him, and perhaps that was why he had to leave. Thus, she resolved never to grow attached to anything again, so that nothing could leave her. Second, she had never been that harsh, not even with her mother, but she realized that no one values kind people, and to avoid further blows, one must not be soft-hearted. Third and finally, through her reflections, she reached this conclusion: people think 1,000 times before taking action against a strong person, but no one cares about the weak. She thought to herself, those who do not learn from the first sting deserve to be stung again. With that resolve, she decided Father to train her in combat and strengthen her abilities. In an attempt to escape reality, she tried to summon sleep, but after a long time of restlessness, she left her room and went to the only place where she could find comfort. Jabbar was sitting by the lake within the bounds of the dark forest. When he sensed the footsteps approaching from behind, he didn't need to turn around. He already knew who it was by the sound of the steps. Nevertheless, he turned to look at his daughter. When he saw her, she appeared as if a dim sun. He knew well that she hadn't come to talk about her sadness but to seek refuge from it in his embrace. So, he opened his arms and welcomed her with a silent warmth. In times of sorrow, it is the one who offers refuge who triumphs, not the one who asks too many questions. After a few moments, she spoke. Do you remember how you used to put my brother and me to sleep with stories when we were little? Yes, I used to tell you stories. And do you remember the phrase you would say to us at the end of each story? I remember. He teased with a smile. But you're too grown up now for bedtime stories, my daughter. For tonight only. Can I be that little girl again? He understood that she didn't really want a story. She wanted to hear his voice for as long as possible to calm her heart. Nothing soothes a daughter's heart like the sound of her father's voice. I will tell you a story about Prophet Solomon, he began. She closed her eyes and let her imagination become the stage for the unfolding events. Jabbar started. One day, the Prophet Solomon was sitting on his throne, surrounded by ministers and dignitaries of the kingdom. As they were gathered, a strange-looking man entered their midst. Everyone present was seeing this man for the first time, yet the Prophet Solomon spoke to him in a manner that suggested he was an old friend. Later, when the stranger had left, one of the ministers approached the throne and asked the prophet, "Who was that man, O prophet of God?" "Why do you ask about him?" replied Solomon. "Because he was looking at me in a way that filled my heart with fear and dread." "Who is he?" "By God's grace," the prophet answered, "he is the angel of death, who came in the form of a man." Fear gripped the minister's heart, especially since the angel of death had been looking solely at him and no one else. In a panic, the minister pleaded, "By God, O prophet, command the winds to carry me to the land of India." The distance between Solomon's kingdom and India was vast, requiring months of travel. This is why the minister sought refuge there. The prophet, understanding that no one can escape destiny, advised against fleeing. If God wills to take your soul, escaping will not benefit you. The minister ignored the advice and persisted until Solomon commanded the winds to carry him to India. The following day, the strange man, the angel of death, returned to the prophet's court. Solomon asked, "You frightened my minister yesterday with your gaze. Why did you look at him that way?" The angel of death replied, "I was commanded to seize his soul an hour later in a distant land, and I was surprised to see him in your court." "In which land were you commanded to take his soul?" asked the prophet. "In India," the angel replied. "What did you do?" "I went at the appointed hour and found your minister waiting for me, so I took his soul." The story was chosen by Jabbar to teach his daughter that death is predetermined. He hoped it would help her understand that nothing could have spared her friend, and if life had been willed for him, no force could have taken it away. Though he knew this lesson wouldn't erase her sorrow, he offered it as a small comfort. When Jabbar finished telling the story, he concluded with a phrase he often used. "Remember, my daughter, that God answers those who call upon him." "Any prayer, Father?" "Yes, any prayer." He continued to tell her stories until she fell asleep in his embrace. Then Jabbar did something unusual. Once his daughter was asleep, he recited an incantation that sent her into a deep, unshakable slumber. Even the loudest drum would not wake her. Turning to the figure hidden among the trees, he said, "Come closer. The time has come." From the darkness emerged the cobra, Terra, a jinn serpent with a color blacker than the night itself. She slithered forward on her massive body until she reached him. "Are you certain, my lord? We almost lost her today." "Terra, what do you think would have happened if I hadn't reached the mountains of the Ghoul in time?" In truth, it was Jabbar who destroyed the Ghoul tribe, not Jumana. To spare her feelings and hide her vulnerability, he let her believe she was the one responsible. Terra said, "But what you are asking for, my lord, is forbidden by all the laws of the earth and the decrees of the heavens. Its punishment is eternal exile." He replied, "I know, and for this reason, what will happen here shortly must remain a secret between us forever." Cobra, the jinn serpent, was not convinced by this, but she lowered her head as a sign of obedience. He commanded her, "Begin your work." Tara approached Jumana's lifeless body on the ground, specifically near her left ear, and recited what was known as the half-incantation of the Barzak. Jumana's body trembled and convulsed as though an earthquake had erupted within her. Tara repeated the incantation over and over until Jumana's body calmed and returned to stillness. Tara then extended her forked black tongue, using it to sense the lifeless body in front of her. Once she confirmed what she needed to, she spoke to her master. "The soul has left her body. She is now in a state of near death. Proceed to the next stage. We can still turn back, my lord." Tara hesitated. Jabbar's eyes turned a furious red, and he vanished from sight faster than Tara could have imagined. When he reappeared less than a second later, he was gripping her neck so tightly she couldn't breathe. He said, "I am fully aware of the danger and don't need to be reminded at every moment. This is not the first time, and it might not be the last." Then he shouted, "I brought you from the volcanoes of Sakar to guard this forest and obey my orders. I now command you to carry out what I have instructed, or I will strip you of every soul within you." Cobra, unable to respond with her neck in Jabbar's grip, nodded submissively. Jabbar released her neck and said, "Proceed to the next stage." Tara coiled her massive, scaly body around the half-dead Jumana. Then, suddenly, she swallowed her whole. Tara slithered swiftly toward the lake and plunged into its depths, still with Jumana inside her. She dove downward until she reached the bottom, where she remained for a long time, reciting incantations, chants, and completing the ritual. Meanwhile, Jabbar stayed above, guarding the area to ensure no one stumbled upon the truth. An hour later, when Tara finished her work, she returned to the surface and released Jumana from her belly. Jabbar asked, "Did everything go as planned?" "Yes, my lord." "When will she wake from her slumber?" "Her body is exhausted, but she will recover by morning." "Will she feel anything different when she wakes?" "No, she won't feel a thing. I don't want her to know about this unless absolutely necessary." "Understood, my lord." Jabbar carried Jumana in his arms and began heading back to the castle. Neither he nor Tara, the Jinn serpent, realized that someone had been secretly watching them from among the forest trees and had seen everything that happened.